Hello. What's going on now? Alright. Hi, everybody. I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks lunchtime streaming show where my hair's gone a little crazy. And I don't know why this is here. That's weird. I need to delete that. Anyways, thanks for joining us. We watch old 16mm films, and that last film was Animal Celebrities, which we scanned on behalf of the Oregon Archive in Pittsburgh. And ultimately, that was part of the Mogul Brothers library, which was a library in New York City that would rent out 16mm shorts. And that was a Pathé Grantland Rice sports short. So I'm sure it had, it was kind of a newsreel-ish type of thing that would show in theaters. And then this was taken from 35 and reduced down to 16, where we scanned it and show it to you. So, yeah. So yesterday, some of you who joined us at the end of the show, YouTube decided to bring the hammer down on a film I was showing called Lentil, which was a Weston Woods film. And I was like, was it the music in it that did it? And I did a little bit of research, and it looks like it was the whole episode, the whole film. So my guess is, because YouTube will, behind the scenes, tell me like, oh, well, this is what it's being used as. So sometimes I'll find out the name of production music. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. That's cool. That's part of this library. Never knew the name of it. But this one was just a series of numbers, and it targeted the whole film. So I have a feeling that Scholastic, the company that bought Weston Woods, probably just, they don't even have it live anywhere. They just basically put it on as content ID to bring it down. And so that's what happened. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. It's not that great of a film anyway, so there you go. This film that we're about to watch, however, is a great film. It's kind of a weird, it's Encyclopedia Britannica, and it's kind of weird because it's involving a little bit of fantasy to get its point across, which from the time period that this film was released, that was not happening. Encyclopedia Britannica was the pretty conservative, static, boring, some people might say, company that wouldn't vary from their course of having a voice of God narrator telling the story with a bunch of stock footage. But this is man and its culture and his culture, and it's a little bit different. So enjoy.
In accordance with our instructions, we continued toward the planet which its inhabitants call the Earth, in order to study their mode of life. The intelligent creatures on this planet call themselves human beings, and they exist in an amazing variety of conditions. Some live in heat-laden jungles, wearing very little clothing on their bodies. We found others who cover their bodies with great gaudiness, even though the heat may be just as great. Some shovel food into their mouths with tiny silver utensils. Some use sticks of bamboo wood. And some use the 5 tentacle-like extensions which grow from the lower part of each hand. Some live in huts made from branches and leaves which grow abundantly nearby. And some laboriously build huge structures which they slowly fashion out of steel and stone. And yet, in spite of these great differences, we found that all these human beings share many things in common. Each group has built up its own established mode of living together, a network of customs, habits, attitudes, and ways of doing things which it has acquired through the ages. This mode of life is called by the Earth's social scientists the culture of the group. It provides an organized system of behavior for the members of the group, giving them a framework within which to shape their lives and presenting them with common motives and goals toward which they direct their everyday activities. Whether persons belong to a primitive tribe or to a complex civilization, they know fairly well what life has in store for them because their culture has marked the way. These cultures are vastly different from each other. The kind of land in which the culture exists plays an important part in shaping its pattern. Biological characteristics may account for some of the differences between cultures. But the main reason why there are so many different kinds of culture among the people of the Earth are the differences in their historical experiences. Despite these differences, there are many universal problems faced by all people, which their different cultures solve in their own ways. They all have ways of taking care of their material welfare, such as getting food and ways of providing shelter for their bodies. They have ways of getting tools and instruments and other things that they need to help them satisfy their wants. They all have some kind of family organization in which the culture will be learned and perpetuated. This is one of the most basic factors in every culture, since without it, the culture would die out. All human cultures have language, and there are thousands of different ones.
How much is this?
Wie viel habe ich dafür zu bezahlen?
这个多少钱?
Quanto costa questo? Est-ce que donc carré?
In addition, they all have gestures, which sometimes make mere vocal language seem quite inadequate as a means of communication. Every culture provides a means for those members who conform to maintain their self-respect and the respect of others. All cultures, through their various religions and mythologies, provide some explanation of man's place in the universe. And every culture has its way of expressing a love of what its own people think is beautiful. However, their tastes may differ from that of other cultures. Every culture has a strong code of what is right and wrong in conduct, which often helps to keep things running smoothly. This code is called by the Earth's social scientists the mores of the culture. For example, it is part of the mores of the culture in the country which its inhabitants call United States to respect private property. And although the streets of this country are lined with four-wheeled vehicles, all looking very much alike, the individual will ignore every vehicle but one, which he calls his own. So powerful is the force of a culture that in a society where male members on certain occasions are expected to wear small horizontal decorations under their chins, a member who instead wears a vertical decoration suffers great agony and mental distress. What is right in one culture may be wrong in another. In some cultures, it may be considered right and proper for a man to have more than one wife. But in the culture of the United States, should a male have on his clothing so much as a strand of hair from a female not his wife, a serious crisis may result. The mores may be different for different situations within the same culture. On public beaches, a person may be seen with very little clothing on his body, and this is considered quite natural. But should the same person appear on a street, even though he may have more clothing on his body, if he's wearing the wrong type of clothing, this would be a violation of the mores of his culture. Not only would he shock other members of his society and cause great disturbance, but his society might also take official action to stop him from this violation of its mores. Generation after generation, this complex pattern of culture traits is handed down. The group has two ways of transmitting its culture to ensure its continued existence. One way is through the natural tendency of children to imitate their elders and to learn from them. Another way is through the direct teaching of the culture to the younger generation.
No, it's still my turn. My turn.
Children, you must share your things. You mustn't be selfish. People should always share things.
Oh, all right, here.
Formal teaching in schools plays a large part in keeping a culture alive through the generations.
That was why he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." To him, individual liberty was more important than life itself.
This does not mean, of course, that every individual soaks up the culture of his group in exactly the same way. The individual accepts or rejects specific culture traits, depending on many things. For example, his own personality and the environment from which he comes are extremely important factors in determining what he accepts and rejects. But there are only certain culture traits on which there can be a choice of acceptance or rejection. For example, the woman who works at a career has chosen to ignore the culture trait that considers the woman's place is in the home. She can do this without serious repercussions. But the same culture requires that women must be married to have children, and this culture trait is too strong for her to attempt to violate. She has no choice but to conform or be subject to great criticism. A culture which permits a certain amount of flexibility makes for a more individualistic people. A culture which demands too rigid conformity tends to stifle individual initiative. Thus, the individual himself is shaped by his culture, just as he helps to shape it. Because of this constant interplay between the individual and his culture, every culture on the planet Earth is always changing, sometimes rapidly and sometimes very slowly. These changes occur in different ways. One is through diffusion of culture traits from one culture to another. The primitive native quickly adopts many of the advanced culture's tools, whose value is readily apparent to him. On the other hand, primitive culture traits like the Indian maize are quickly adopted by the advanced cultures who see value in them. The Indian's tobacco has been adopted by advanced cultures all over the world. The white man's foot is often clad in the Indian's moccasin, just as the white man's shoes are seen on the Indian's foot. The Indian has found great value in the white man's vehicles, and the white man has found important values in the Indian's vehicle too. So cultures grow and change through their interaction on each other in the process called cultural diffusion. Another way in which cultures change is through invention and discovery. Every technological development brings about a greater or lesser change in the culture pattern. It can well be imagined what an infinite number of culture traits are bound up with a primary invention such as the wheel, and with a primary discovery like the use of fire. Such primary inventions and discoveries have made possible the immensely complicated developments of a technological age. An example is the vehicle called the automobile, which runs on 4 wheels and whose engine is driven by fire. Its introduction brought vast culture changes, especially in the country called the United States. The whole pattern of living of that nation has been changed. People are moving out of the city into suburban areas. Farmers are in closer contact with the towns. Transportation of goods has been revolutionized. These are only a few of the great number of new culture traits which have been formed around the invention of the automobile. But the inhabitants of planet Earth do not always welcome culture changes. There is often a resistance to anything different from the habits of the past.
Julie, when I was a girl, we wouldn't have been caught dead with no more clothes on than that. My stars, what are our young people coming to these days?
Oh, Granny, everybody dresses like this.
Well, I don't approve of it.
Material culture traits like clothing change faster than non-material culture traits. The youth still feels he should walk on the street side of his companion, even though the material reasons, such as muddy streets, no longer exist. The military man's salute, originally to lift the visor of the knight's helmet, continues in spite of the fact that knights have been gone for hundreds of years. But even though material culture traits change more easily than non-material, change of any kind is often opposed by vested interests.
We just can't do it, Jim. We've got too much tied up in present equipment.
I've seen it work. It turns out those stampings twice as fast. I'm telling you, if they install those machines, it'll put half of us out of work within the year.
In view of my 20 years of work in this area, I am convinced that this proposal would be extremely expensive and very uncertain of success. It can contribute nothing but confusion in an area already very much disturbed.
In spite of such opposition, cultures are always changing. New ways of doing and of thinking gradually take hold. But the basic mores on which each culture is built change very slowly. Thus, they provide a set of fairly stable, long-range goals, which all the people of a given culture seek together in their effort to live in a way which they consider satisfying. As already pointed out, there are innumerable different cultures on the planet Earth. Many encompass a very small group, involving only a tribe or a series of villages. Such tiny culture groups dot the continent which the Earth people call Africa. On the other hand, the continent called Europe is largely covered by a huge civilized culture which is spread over many parts of the Earth. But whether a culture is a tribal way of life or a great civilization, it serves its people in the same way, by setting up goals for a way of life through which they can achieve personal happiness if they conform. Thus, knowing the culture of any group charts the way to a fuller understanding of the people themselves.
Pretty heavy stuff, with that kind of hook, with the space alien at the beginning. It's an interesting film, and I haven't had a chance to really investigate who did it, because that is a real departure from Encyclopedia Britannica. They were really pretty conservative in how they relayed information. All right. So behind me, I have a telecine where we can transfer film live, and I've got a film set up here. Annoyingly, it's from the Mecklenburg County Public Library System, where they would just splice in their little card, intertitle, that said, hey, this belongs to our library. And they would do it at the beginning or at the end during the credits. So this one is missing the title, and I'm wondering if that's had something to do with the fact that they spliced something in. But this is called Canoe. Enjoy.
When I awoke this morning, it was clear and warm again. I fell asleep last night listening to the sound of the falls and woke at dawn. They were just ahead, and a portage had to be... It was an easy one, about 75 paces. It felt good to get going first thing in the morning. It is a belief that falls and rapids are sacred to the Indian people. For many, it is still a custom to stop by rough waters and make an offering of tobacco to appease the water spirits. Dangerous waters were never run. They were always bypassed or portaged. One is never lonely on the river. There is solitude, because you're not with your own kind. Everything around is alive and moving. The fish, the insects, the trees, nothing is wasted. Each movement has a purpose, and everything seems to be in sharper focus. My canoe is now my friend. At first it was just another necessity that had to be carried with the rest of my gear. But now it's been through as much as I have. Portages, rapids, a rainstorm 2 days back. I depend on it, and it depends on me. A piece of the living forest cut down and shaped for man. It felt good leaving the river and portaging through the woods again. I am a land creature after all, and can only flirt with water at best. Even these trees burnt by man are part of my net. Like the beaver and otter, I can't resist the river, and no portage can tempt me to stay on solid ground for long. I took time out for lunch and a look at the map. The Blood Vein and Gammon River first I've paddled in there in Manitoba. The province is full of them. Grass River, the Rat, Sassaginagak, Winnipeg, Whitemouth. All of them promise wilderness. The kind of timelessness that I have felt on this trip. By late afternoon, I paddled into Aikens Lake and picked a campsite on a small beach on the east shore. I caught a lake trout for my dinner and then rested by the warm fire. In a while, I'll be far away from this peacefulness. I know I'll come back to Manitoba again.
Well, some of you called it Canadian. It wasn't National Film Board, but it was Canadian. Anywho, let's see. What do we got? What have we got lined up? Okay, so this next film is interesting. I've been doing some work for a filmmaker slash collector named Craig Baldwin, who is based in San Francisco. And so I said, hey, send me stuff, and we'll scan it, and then we'll see if we can monetize it with stock footage. And he sent me this. And the thing is, he's all about clips. Like, he'll pull stuff out. I mean, this is the type of filmmaking he does. He's very media collage based. And so I have no idea where this came from and where he got it from. And it's definitely beat up, but it's fascinating nonetheless. So this is Psychorama. It's a film about a technique to do subliminal stuff in fictional film. Enjoy.
It's the Date with Death, which was made with a revolutionary new process called Psychorama, a subliminal communication by precog. In Psychorama, which was developed by Dr. Robert Corrigan and Mr. Hal C. Becker, by using this machine, a word or a picture can be flashed on the screen so fast that although you don't see it consciously, it can put information directly into your mind. By this method, it can affect your emotions so that anger, fear, or suspense will race through your subconscious mind. Oh, and this machine is called a polygraph, or a lie detector. Scientifically measures emotional reactions. and has been proven that the human being's emotional reactions to Psychorama are tremendous. Psychorama by Precon has been written up in Life, Popular Science, thousands of newspaper articles. It amazes me, but it scares some people. The United States government and various state governments have debated making it illegal because of the fear of brainwashing. And it's been banned on television as being too powerful because people have been afraid that it might make them buy something that they don't want. But scientists, among them Dr. Corrigan, have proven there's nothing to be afraid of. They have proven that your subconscious mind, like your conscious mind, senses everything that you see or hear. Psychorama cannot make you do or believe anything that you don't want to. And there's no advertising in the picture you're about to see. The only purpose of Psychorama is to increase your enjoyment of the picture by making you feel fear and suspense as you've never felt them before. These subliminal symbols are 100% safe for you. They may frighten you, but they won't hurt you. But let's take a look at a scene from A Date with Death. In it, there will be two pictures on the screen at the same time. One, the motion picture that you see consciously with your eyes, and the other is a subliminal picture. Did you see the subliminal symbols? Probably not. Only about 2% of the audience with very good eyesight and looking at the right part of the screen at the right time could possibly see them. Now let's run the same scene again. But this time we'll flash the symbols on the screen slow enough for everyone to see them. That was a little easier to see, wasn't it? The symbols that you saw are the ones that only your brain will see in A Date with Death. Now let's try it again the same way you saw it the first time. Try to remember where and when the symbols appear, and look closely for them again this time. Well, quite a few of you may have seen the subliminal symbols that time. That's the way they appear throughout A Date with Death, stabbing into your subconscious mind all through the picture. Psychorama won't hurt you if you live through it. In fact, I think you'll enjoy it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with death.
Ludicrous. I mean, I would say that there's so many more explicit things that make you, editing, acting, good dialogue, all those things can contribute to you being sucked in and relaying what it needs to be relayed. All right, so people have been asking me what this shirt is I'm wearing. And I thought I've worn it before, but it's Watch More Movies. This is an Alamo Drafthouse shirt I got some time ago when I helped open the Alamo here in Raleigh. Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. Let's see. What can we watch? Yeah. Oh, and Gabriel, thank you for the coffee. Much appreciated. One way you can support AV Geeks is you can buy us some delicious coffee that will percolate in our nervous systems and make us do tedious things. Like we just last 2 weeks did a big push to get rid of all the vinegar bombs, all the films that were so destroyed by the vinegar syndrome that they could not be transferred. They're too brittle, or they're what we call hockey pucks, where they're so bound together that when you try to peel it apart, they just fall apart. This happens to some films, and some of these, when I got the films, they were already in some sort of state like that, and I held on to them much longer than I should have, thinking that maybe there would be some way that I could save some of them. But a lot of these films, I already have other copies of them, or I'm running across beautiful copies of them in this Coronet collection that I'm working with. So it pains me to throw them out, but it also makes me realize that there's other better copies of the films out there. So there you go. We talk a lot about films, but we don't talk as much as we should about reading. And I have films that talk about lots of different things, and this one tells you how to read a book. Enjoy.
And of the increased production. But what about the skilled workers who are replaced by machines? Now, they're our real problem.
My statement, Ray, referred to the long-run effects of automation on employment.
I have to agree with Marjorie. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I didn't think we were going to cover this particular problem. Now, in my reading, I covered the... Mr. Moderator, let me rephrase that question. We're trying to find...
I'm sorry, Ray, but we'll have to save that argument for next week's program. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Young People's TV Forum. Won't you join us again next week when we'll conclude our discussion, The Effects of Automation on Employment. See you then. That's all, kids. Nice job.
Thanks.
Oh, Marjorie.
What's the matter, Chuck? You didn't say very much today.
I don't know, Ray. I read 2 books on automation and employment problems, but, well, I didn't get too much out of them.
Well, it happens. Say, what are you doing tonight, Chuck?
Well, I guess I'll do some more reading for next week's program.
Great. What do you say we do it together?
Hey, that's an idea.
Good. We could go over the library now. I've got the list of recommended books from the moderator.
When selecting a book from the library, we have to think about several questions. What information do we need? What information or ideas does the book offer? Chuck and Ray are selecting books they found listed in the card catalog under 2 general topics, automation and employment. Several of the books on their reading list look promising, and the boys will compare the books carefully before they choose one. The title is often a good clue to the content of a book. Ray feels that this title may be too general for the topic in which they're interested. Chuck thinks that maybe this one, which discusses trends in automation, might be better. Ray agrees that it covers the topic, but he reminds Chuck to check the copyright date. This material may be too old to offer anything up to date. And so they turn to the third book. The title is closely related to their topic, and Chuck points out that the book is quite recent. 2 more important items to check in selecting a book are author and publisher. Are you familiar with the author's name or any of his works? What is his reputation? You should also consider the publishing company and its reputation. Since this book is on their reading list and seems good for their purpose, they decide that
It's the one they will study tonight.
Hey, Ray, this chapter called How Production is Carried On is just what we wanted.
You know, it sure is. And there are a lot of related topics here, too. Money and prices, the union's viewpoint, management.
Money and prices, union, management. Where'd you find all that?
Well, it's all here in the table of contents.
Of course, use your table of contents. In a factual book of this type, the table of contents is a valuable aid. It lists chapter headings and may even include brief summaries of each chapter. After the boys had been reading for a while, Ray said,
Well, guess I'll start reading that chapter on production now.
Started? Well, I've almost finished that.
Yes, but don't forget the other chapters. It's a good idea to skim through the whole book first and sort of get acquainted with all the material and pick up the author's main ideas.
Oh, come on, Ray. Don't tell me you've read every chapter.
Of course, Ray hasn't read every chapter, but he has skimmed through the book rapidly, making use of as many reading aids as he could. For example, the title of a chapter often indicates the subject matter treated. A contrasting typeface differentiates this foreword from the rest of the chapter. Key ideas in the chapter are indicated by dark, heavy type. Charts and diagrams, which are frequently overlooked, are additional important reading aids. Throughout the book are bibliographies, sometimes at the end of each chapter. A bibliography is a selected list of related books for further study. At the back of the book is the index, where each topic in the book and the page number where it is discussed are conveniently listed. Other reading aids are footnotes. Footnotes may refer to references outside the text or to a portion of the text itself. Notice the small reference number, which corresponds to the number after the statement in the text. So there are many reading aids that can be used.
Say, you read a book with a sort of system, don't you, Ray?
That's right. Of course, you've got to remember that this is a certain kind of book. And we're using a system to get information about our particular problem. Suppose we were reading, say a novel or a biography. We might do it a little differently.
But we'd still use some kind of a system for reading.
Right.
You know, Ray, I've skimmed through this whole book, and now I'm reading the selected chapter again. But I can't seem to find any place where the author comes right out and says whether automation increases or decreases employment.
Of course not, Chuck. This book doesn't take sides on any question. The author says so himself, right in the preface.
I never read the preface.
Well, it's really a very important part of the book, you know. Read the second paragraph of the preface. Here.
This writer will give opinions, but not presume to offer solutions to problems. His task in this book is to present material facts and to direct his readers to other sources of information. Well, what do you know?
You see, that's his attitude. Another author might have had a very different purpose.
Well, that explains a lot. I'd have known the author's purpose if I had read the preface first.
You're catching on. Sometimes a preface gives you the key to the whole book. You know, Chuck, our next telecast ought to be a really good one. We found a lot of new material in this book.
Yeah, and speaking of television, the author says on page 235 that television creates unfortunate results for millions of people.
Are you sure? Let's look at that again. Television is a means of enjoyment for many, and it may also convey valuable information.
Nevertheless, it can bring to millions of viewers slanted appeals, which may create unfortunate results. That's a little different from what you said, Chuck. Besides, I think I remember something in Chapter 1 about TV.
Chapter 1?
Yes, Chapter 1. Here it is on page 14. One can recall television campaigns to mold public opinion, the final results of which have been of general benefit.
I see. That gives both sides of the picture. But how did you happen to remember this statement way back in Chapter 1? I thought we were just skimming all the chapters, except Chapter 7, the one which deals with our topic.
But Chapter 1 is generally kind of an introduction to the whole book. So I read it carefully.
I think I'm beginning to get it now. You read through the entire book rather quickly to get yourself familiar with the material and the key ideas.
But certain parts, such as the preface or introductory chapter, and sometimes the last chapter...
I know. You read those more carefully to understand the author's purpose.
Now you've got it. Well, it's getting late.
You know, Ray, both of us read this same book, but I think you got a lot more out of it than I did.
Well, you can get more out of a book if you just remember what we've been talking about today.
Okay, let's see how I do. There's author, preface, index, references, footnotes, rapid reading and careful reading, and author's attitude.
Hold it. You've got the idea. Well, so long, Chuck. See you tomorrow.
Okay, Ray. Good night. And thanks.
Night.
A book is more than a fund of information. It presents ideas and attitudes which the discriminating reader must analyze and judge for himself. When you can profit from the information, when you can weigh evidence, when you can compare and contrast the viewpoints of different authors, when you can form your own opinions, you are learning how to read a book.
What, may I ask, is a dear little cupcake like you doing with nasty old school books? My dear child, we haven't had school or books in ages.
No school? Really?
Why don't you get rid of that school book? You can drop them in here.
It'll get all bound up in there.
Well, of course it will, dear child. And so it should. Books tamper with man's basic, natural ignorance. Now, what could be worse than that?
But I can't burn this book. It's school property.
Nonsense! Apple sugar. You just need to get into the mood.
Books are not where it's at, teaching you how to spell cat. I know you'd rather play, so why don't you throw all your books away? Books are made for burning, the fire is already yearning to put an end to any learning.
1, 3, 5, 9, throw them in, the fire's right.
Put the books in the fire, see the flames growing higher. Burning books is our heart's desire.
2, 4, 6, 8, time to incinerate.
Books will not make you wise, and reading's bad for your eyes. I am sure you agree, so why don't you give all your books to me? Books are made for burning, fire is already yearning to put an end to any learning.
This one here is very good about a man named Robin Hood.
Put the books in the fire, see the flames growing higher. Burning books is our heart's desire.
No, I never liked Tom Sawyer. I won't be a book destroyer.
confused, teaching you things you can't use. You should listen to me. Burning your books will set your mind free.
So now I'm just programming films, or I can then lead into that Books Are for Burning short, which is from Magnificent Major, which is part of this series called Unicorn Tales, where there's a couple of those that I have, but none of them are nearly as good as Magnificent Major. And I think Tisha Campbell is our young protagonist, and she brings it, man. So good. I don't know if it's been a long time since I've shown that film in its entirety, and so I might have to do that again in the new year. But so good. And thank you so much for coffee, Colin. Thank you for the delicious coffee and caffeine. And thanks for joining us today. I really, you guys adding the subliminals to the How to Read a Book film was pretty funny. Yeah, so tomorrow we'll be back and we'll be watching some more 16mm films, including the film that I had threaded up, but we ran out of time. Time goes by very quickly when we're watching 16mm films together, and it's because I'm enjoying it, having a great time. And so I've been reaching out to a lot of archivist friends because there was an EMEA conference, a virtual EMEA conference, but I didn't really have time for it, so I reached out to a lot of friends, and many of them were like, how can you do a daily streaming show of films from your collection? And I'm like, how could I not do it? It really... It's a way for me to share, and that's the reason why I collect, is to show the films that I have, provided YouTube doesn't try to cut the cord. But it's really great, and you guys make it great. So thank you so much for contributing. One thing you can do to contribute is hit the thumbs up or the like or the share, and continue to tune in. It's always great. Also, you can buy DVDs at avgeeks.com, and again, coffee at buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks. Those are all great ways to support us. But just being there and lending us your eyeballs for an hour, that's really what we like. So, as always, please rewind and love each other, and take care of yourself. And the headlines are not always... you won't find necessarily solace in those, and the headlines are a little clickbaity. So take time for yourself, and get off the screens. Maybe read a book. But we'll see you again tomorrow, 1:00. Take care.